I don't believe in love. Javi's words echoed through the crowded church at the exact moment he was supposed to say, I do. 400 guests gasped in unison. The priest froze. Maria, radiant in her 15,000 euro gown, could have run. She could have slapped him. She could have fainted. Instead, she did something no one expected. She smiled, a slow, deliberate smile, like a predator that had just cornered its favorite prey. Then, my dear husband, she said, her voice a soft, dangerous promise, I will teach you. What began as a wedding had just become a declaration of war, and Madrid would never be the same. The May sun filtered through the stained glass windows of the San Jerónimo el Real church, casting a kaleidoscope of colors across the marble altar where Maria Soledad Vega was about to become Mrs. Malhotra. At 32, she was the personification of Madrid's elegance. Golden brown hair was swept into a low chignon adorned with Majorcan pearls. Her satin skin looked as if it had been kissed by the Mediterranean sun, and her green eyes held an intensity that could make proud men lose their composure. Her dress, an exclusive creation by Palomo Spain, was a symphony in ivory silk that flowed like water over her curves. A diamond necklace, a three-generation Vega heirloom, rested on the delicate line of her collarbone. Every detail had been curated for this moment, from her Louboutin heels to the platinum tiara that had belonged to her grandmother. Across from her, Javi Malhotra radiated a magnetic presence that made the very air around him vibrate. At 37, he had taken Madrid by storm, turning skyscrapers into works of art and forgotten neighborhoods into architectural jewels. His tuxedo, hand-tailored on Savile Row, clung flawlessly to his athletic frame. His black hair gleamed under the golden light, and his dark brown eyes, eyes that had seduced ministers, actresses, and heiresses, were now fixed on Maria with a disconcerting intensity. 400 guests filled the ancient wooden pews. The cream of Madrid society was present: marquises and countesses, CEOs of Europe's most influential companies, artists whose works hung in the world's great museums, and politicians who decided the fate of nations. They had all come to witness the union of the heiress to an interior design empire and the man who was rebuilding half of Madrid with his own two hands. Father Miguel Angel Fernandez, a 68-year-old man who had presided over royal weddings, was raising his hands in blessing when Javi did the unthinkable. Instead of waiting for the traditional vows, he leaned toward Maria, his words a whisper only she was meant to hear, yet one that the church's reverent silence amplified to the front rows. Know this now, Maria. I do not believe in love. His voice was controlled, almost clinical, as if he were closing a business deal. This marriage is an agreement between two intelligent people. Mutual respect, mutual benefits, appearances maintained, but do not delude yourself into thinking there will be flowers, romantic declarations, or eternal promises of devotion. A shocked murmur rippled through the pews, like a wave crashing against the Gothic walls. The Marquesa de Villafranca brought a gloved hand to her chest, her eyes wide. The French ambassador leaned in to whisper something urgent to his wife. 3 government ministers exchanged looks of utter disbelief. Maria felt the world spin for a moment, not from shock, but from a strange sense of liberation. Throughout their engagement, She had noticed Javi's calculated distance, his methodical approach to even their most intimate moments. Other men had courted her with flowers and dramatic declarations. Javi had won her with deep intellectual conversations, with genuine respect for her career, with a partnership that transcended conventional romantic games. But now, at the altar, with 400 people as witnesses, he had stripped away all pretense, and Maria discovered something surprising about herself. She admired his brutal honesty. A slow, almost feline smile curved her full lips. Her green eyes flashed with a dangerous light, the same light that appeared when she took on an impossible project and turned a condemned space into something extraordinary. She lifted her chin slightly, her voice crystal clear, cutting through the tense silence like a silver blade. Then, my dear husband, I will teach you. The impact of those 6 words was seismic. The entire church seemed to hold its breath. Father Fernandez, who had witnessed royal scandals and princely vows, was, for the first time in his 40-year career, speechless. Javi blinked, just once, and Maria saw something flicker in those dark eyes. Surprise, intrigue, or perhaps, just perhaps, a flash of vulnerability he immediately suppressed. Interesting, he murmured, his low voice now charged with a new tension. And how exactly do you plan to do that? Maria took an imperceptible step closer, closing the space between them until she could feel the warmth of his body, the subtle scent of his cologne, a custom blend of sandalwood, bergamot, and something indefinably wild. Patience, Javi. Love is not a project you build in 90 days with a timeline and a budget. Her tone was almost maternal, yet teasing. It's an art, and I am very, very good at art. The tension between them was palpable now, charging the air like electricity before a storm. The guests watched, mesmerized, witnessing not a wedding, but an elegant declaration of war between 2 forces of nature. The priest finally regained his composure, clearing his throat. Well, perhaps we could proceed with the traditional words of the ceremony. Javi never took his eyes off Maria. Yes, father, proceed. But as the priest recited the ancient rites, something had irrevocably changed. Maria had accepted a challenge that would transform not only their marriage, but their very lives, in ways neither of them could yet imagine. When they finally kissed, a chaste, church appropriate kiss that lasted exactly 3 seconds longer than protocol demanded, Maria felt Javi's lips curve into an almost imperceptible smile against hers. Let the games begin, he whispered against her mouth. Oh, my love, she whispered back, her green eyes dancing with a perilous promise. You have no idea what you've just started. As they turned to face their guests as husband and wife, the ovation that thundered through the church was not just celebratory. It was charged with anticipation. Everyone knew they had just witnessed the beginning of something extraordinary. Walking down the central aisle, Maria's arm linked with Javi's. She could feel the curious stares, the half-hidden whispers, the speculation already taking shape. Madrid's high society adored an elegant scandal, and they had just been served a story that would be told in drawing rooms for decades. But Maria didn't care about the whispers. Her mind was already at work, strategizing, planning her next move. Javi Malhotra believed love was an illusion, perfect. She had transformed impossible rooms into dream spaces, taken condemned buildings, and turned them into magazine-worthy residences. A heart of ice would be just another renovation project. And this time, the result would be a masterpiece. The church doors swung open, spilling the golden Madrid sun over the couple. Photographers' flashes fired in a blinding volley, capturing the moment Maria and Javi emerged, not just as husband and wife, but as elegant adversaries in a dance that was just beginning. A white Rolls Royce waited for them, decorated with white peonies. As Javi helped Maria into the car, his fingers brushed against the bare skin of her arm, and she felt a shiver that had nothing to do with the May breeze. Lesson number one, she said, arranging the train of her dress with studied grace. Love doesn't happen at the altar. It happens in the small moments when no one is watching. Javi took the seat beside her, his aristocratic profile silhouetted against the window. And you truly believe you can teach me something I consider fundamentally impossible? Maria smiled, her eyes fixed on the Madrid landscape gliding past. The historic buildings he had restored, the public squares he had revitalized, the visible marks of his architectural genius were scattered across the city like a permanent signature. Javi, my dear, she said, her voice soft as silk and sharp as a razor. You rebuild entire cities. I rebuild souls. We'll see who is more talented. The car slid through the streets of Madrid, heading for the Hotel Villa Magna, where a reception for 300 awaited. But the real party, the real challenge, was just beginning. And as the city spread around them like a golden chessboard, Maria Soledad Vega Malhotra began to plan the most audacious move of her life, to conquer the heart of a man who swore he didn't have one. The presidential suite at the Hotel Villa Magna was a sanctuary of luxury Maria had helped design 2 years prior. Now, for the first time, she stood on the other side of her own creation, not as the visionary designer, but as a newlywed on a honeymoon that promised to be anything but conventional. The 200 square meter apartment stretched before her like a film set, with Carrara marble floors and floor to ceiling windows offering a panoramic view of Retiro Park. The dining table could seat 12, but tonight it was set for 2. If Javi even bothered to show up. It was exactly 9:43 in the evening when Maria finally admitted she was alone. Javi had disappeared into the master suite 3 hours ago, locking himself in with a stack of contracts and his laptop. The muffled sound of business calls bled from under the mahogany door, a mix of English, Hindi, and Spanish that perfectly defined his priorities. Maria slipped out of her Jimmy Choo sandals and walked barefoot across the cool marble to the balcony. Madrid spread out below her, a map of golden lights. The Gran Via pulsed with nightlife while she stood in a bubble of luxurious silence. She had changed out of her wedding gown and into an ensemble chosen specifically for this night, a French silk robe the color of champagne that kissed her skin like water, leaving her shoulders bare and revealing just enough black lace beneath to hint at unspoken promises. Every detail had been calculated to seduce, to break through her husband's glacial composure. But Javi hadn't even noticed. Pathetic, she murmured to herself, but her voice held more determination than self-pity. Maria Vega had not reached the pinnacle of the design world by surrendering at the first obstacle. If Javi wanted to play the game of indifference, He was about to discover she had invented the rules. She went back inside and found her Hermes bag. If her husband preferred spreadsheets to his wife on their wedding night, she would find her own entertainment. 20 minutes later, Maria was seated at the most coveted table at Diver XO, the three Michelin star restaurant that normally required reservations 2 months in advance. But Maria Vega, now Malhotra, had her privileges. Senora Malhotra, the sommelier said, offering a glass of 1996 Dom Perignon. A special night deserves a special celebration. Maria accepted the flute, the irony not lost on her. Here she was, on one of the most important nights of her life, toasting alone while her husband reviewed contracts as if she were just another item on his agenda. To marriage, she murmured, raising the glass to no one in particular. Whose marriage? The deep, familiar voice made Maria turn slowly. Javi stood at the entrance of the restaurant, still in his white dress shirt from the ceremony, but now with the sleeves rolled up wide and his tie loosened. His hair was slightly disheveled, the first time she had ever seen him look anything less than impeccable. Mine, apparently, she replied, taking a slow sip of champagne, though the groom decided he had more important things to do on his wedding night. Javi approached the table with that predatory walk of his, which made waiters part and other diners stare. He pulled out the chair across from her and sat, his dark eyes studying her with an intensity that made her skin tingle. 3 hours, he said. You waited exactly 3 hours before leaving. You were counting? I was listening. He gestured to the sommelier, who instantly appeared with another glass. A flicker of impatience crossed Javi's face. Maria tilted her head, intrigued. And what else did you hear? You taking off your shoes at 9:45, walking to the balcony at 10, coming back for your purse at 10:15. Javi nodded for the sommelier to pour his champagne. I heard every sound. You sigh when you're frustrated. His voice was low, cutting through the restaurant's ambient murmur. Tiny, almost inaudible sighs you probably don't even realize you're making. The revelation caught her completely off guard. For 3 hours, while she had believed herself ignored, he had been aware of her every move, cataloging her habits as if she were an interesting puzzle to be solved. Then why didn't you leave the room? She asked, her voice tight. Because I was curious to see how long you would wait. Ravi took a sip of champagne, his eyes never leaving her face. And because I had work to finish. Work! The word was laced with disdain. On your wedding night. Our wedding night, he corrected smoothly. That began the moment you decided you were going to teach me about love. That was when our dynamic shifted from a business arrangement to something far more intriguing. Chef Munoz approached their table personally, greeting Ravi with the deference reserved for the most influential of clients. Mr. Malhotra, what a pleasure to have you again, madam. You've already begun the tasting menu, but I can prepare something special for you both. What Maria chose is perfect, Ravi said, his gaze still locked on her. I always trust her taste. The simple, direct statement sent a wave of warmth through Maria's chest. It was the first genuine compliment he had ever offered her, and it came disguised as a casual remark about food. When they were alone again, Maria leaned forward slightly. So, you came here to continue our negotiation? I came because a wife who leaves alone on her wedding night sends a very clear message to all of Madrid, Ravi said, and because I discovered something interesting while I was finalizing those contracts. And what was that? He hesitated for a fraction of a second, a pause so slight Maria would have missed it if she hadn't been studying every micro expression on his face. That I couldn't concentrate, knowing you were out here, waiting. The raw honesty of his confession made the air between them hum with a new tension. Maria felt her pulse quicken, but she kept her voice steady. And that bothered you? Deeply. Ravi swirled the glass between his fingers, a gesture she was beginning to recognize as a sign he was processing something complex. I'm not accustomed to distractions. Ah. Maria smiled, a slow, dangerous smile that made his eyes narrow. So that's what's happened. I've become a distraction. Don't flatter yourself just yet. I'm not flattering myself. I'm taking notes. She took another sip of champagne, letting the silence stretch between them. Observation 1. Ravi Malhotra gets distracted when something is beyond his control. Your arrogance is impressive. My precision is impressive, she corrected. Observation 2. He counts the minutes when he's anxious for something he doesn't want to admit he desires. Ravi set his glass down with a sharp click. And what exactly do you think I desire? Maria leaned forward until their faces were inches apart. She could feel the heat radiating from his skin, see the fine lines around his eyes that appeared when he was focused. To find out if I'm really capable of teaching you something you consider impossible, she murmured. Or if you are, in fact, immune to everything that makes other men human. And if I'm immune, then, Maria said, her lips curving into a smile that promised delicious danger. This will be the most fascinating project of my career. The waiter brought their first course, an artistic creation that looked more like sculpture than food. But neither of them looked away. The tension between them had become almost palpable, charging the air like electricity before a summer storm. Rules, Ravi said finally. Rules? If we're going to do this, whatever asterisk this asterisk is, we need clear parameters. He cut into his dish with surgical precision. You do not interfere with my business. You do not create romantic expectations I cannot fulfill. And you absolutely do not try to fundamentally change me. Maria considered his terms as she savored a bite of the extraordinary dish. My rules. You do not treat me like a business acquisition. You do not assume your emotional fortifications are stronger than my determination. And you absolutely do not underestimate what a determined woman can achieve when she has a clear objective. They stared at each other for a long moment, each taking the other's measure, recognizing they had just made a pact that transcended any marital contract. Deal? Ravi asked, extending his hand across the table. Maria looked at his offered hand, long, elegant, with a small scar on his index finger that told a story she didn't yet know. Instead of shaking it, she threaded her fingers through his, an intimacy that made his eyes widen almost imperceptibly. Deal, she said. But know this, Ravi Malhotra. When I'm finished with you, you'll wonder how you ever lived without knowing what it means to be truly alive. He didn't pull his hand away. Instead, his thumb traced a slow arc over her skin, a gesture so subtle it could have been accidental, if not for the way his eyes fixated on the point where their skin touched. We'll see, he murmured. But Maria had already seen enough. The way he reacted to her touch, the subtle shift in his breathing, the way his fingers had hesitated before lacing with hers. It all told a different story than the one he was trying to sell. Ravi Malhotra might not believe in love, but he was most certainly not immune to his wife. And that was the first crack in his icy armor. The night was long, filled with extraordinary dishes and a conversation that danced dangerously between intellectual provocation and unacknowledged sexual tension. When they finally returned to the hotel at 2 in the morning, something between them had shifted, a new awareness of each other that made every gesture feel charged with meaning. In the suite, Ravi paused at the door to the master bedroom. "Good night, Maria. Good night, husband." She saw him hesitate again, just for a second, before he closed the door between them. But Maria smiled as she walked to her own room. A hesitation was progress, and tomorrow the real work would begin. After all, she turned ruins into palaces. A frozen heart would simply be her next renovation. 3 weeks after the wedding, Maria and Ravi had settled into a routine that was both civilized and fraught with unresolved tension. The 400 square meter penthouse in the exclusive Salamanca neighborhood had become an elegant stage where two forces of nature orbited one another, never quite colliding. Maria would wake at 7 to find a perfectly made espresso waiting in the black marble Italian kitchen, along with the Financial Times folded at the exact angle she liked for scanning the headlines. Ravi would have already left for the office, but he left small signs of his presence: the lingering scent of his cologne in the air, a washed cup in the drying rack, sometimes a brief note about a social engagement they had to attend. She never heard him make the coffee, never caught him reading the paper first to leave it in the perfect position. But these silent gestures spoke louder than any romantic declaration other men had ever made to her. The penthouse itself was an architectural masterpiece Ravi had acquired 5 years prior and renovated himself. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a 360-degree view of Madrid, from the royal palace to the distant Sierra de Guadarrama mountains. The private terrace housed a suspended garden Maria had redesigned, transforming it into an urban oasis of jasmine, lavender, and a small, constantly murmuring fountain. It was here that Maria spent her mornings, working on projects that came in from all over Europe. Her reputation had only grown since the marriage. Being Ravi Malhotra's wife opened doors that even her exceptional talent had not been able to unlock alone. Hotels in Barcelona, princely residences in London, even a secret commission from a member of the Saudi royal family. But the project that truly consumed her attention was sleeping in the room next to hers every night. "Senora Malhotra," said Carmen, the 52-year-old housekeeper who ran the home with military efficiency, "flowers have arrived." Maria looked up from the blueprints spread across the glass table. Flowers. 3 dozen white roses, no card. Maria frowned. Ravi wasn't a man for obvious romantic gestures, but perhaps— "Place them in the main living room, please." "I already have, but I thought you should know. They arrived at 10:15 this morning, the exact moment Mr. Malhotra called the house." The connection was immediate, and it made Maria's heart skip a beat. Ravi had sent flowers at the precise moment he was calling, likely to ensure she was home to receive them. The gesture was calculated, yet in a way that revealed an intimate attention to the details of her routine. "Thank you, Carmen." When she was alone again, Maria smiled down at her sketches. Another crack in the armor. He was paying attention to her in ways he probably didn't even consciously realize. The phone rang at 2:30 in the afternoon. Another pattern she'd noticed. Ravi always called around this time, ostensibly to confirm schedules or discuss practical matters. But the conversations invariably stretched on far longer than necessary. "Maria." His voice on the line sounded more strained than usual. Ravi, thank you for the flowers. There was a pause. Flowers? The white roses. They arrived at 10:15. Ah, another pause. You're welcome. Maria smiled. He'd forgotten he'd sent them, which meant the gesture had been more impulsive than calculated. Interesting. You sound distracted, she observed. Difficult meeting. The Toledo project is facing resistance from the city council. Toledo, the boutique hotel she was designing, their first official collaboration. They had spent countless hours discussing concepts, debating details, their heads nearly touching over the architectural plans as they created something that would be both historically respectful and revolutionary. What exactly are they questioning? Maria asked, already standing, her mind racing. The glass facade on the north wing. They say it doesn't integrate with the historical heritage. I'm on my way. Maria, you don't have to. 20 minutes. She hung up before he could protest. Ravi's office occupied the top 3 floors of a skyscraper he had designed himself on the Gran Via. Maria had never been there. It was another territory he kept carefully separate from their personal life. But today, as she rode the private elevator that opened directly into his office, she felt like a general advancing into enemy territory. The doors slid open to reveal a space that was pure Ravi. Clean lines, neutral colors, cutting-edge technology integrated so seamlessly it was nearly invisible. Massive windows offered a spectacular view of the city, but it was the wall covered in architectural plans that captured her attention. Dozens of projects in various stages, some clearly his, others by famed architects, all organized with the obsessive precision she was learning to recognize as his trademark. I didn't actually expect you to come. Ravi was standing behind a tempered glass desk, his tie loosened, his sleeves rolled up. For the first time since she'd met him, he looked genuinely tired. Of course I came. It's my project, too. Maria approached the desk, where the Toledo plans were spread out among meeting minutes and printed emails. Show me the problem. For the next hour, they worked side by side. Maria sketched and resketched the problematic facade, while Ravi offered insights into the council's political concerns. It was the first time they had functioned as true partners, and Maria was struck by how easily their minds synchronized. He anticipated her needs: a different pencil, a ruler, a coffee, while she translated his practical visions into visual forms that sang on the page. This, Ravi said, when she finished the third sketch, this will work. I'm sure of it. Maria leaned over the desk to adjust a final detail, unconsciously closing the space between them. Historical integration isn't about replication, she said. It's about dialogue. Dialogue, he repeated, but his voice had subtly changed. When Maria looked up, she found he was no longer looking at the drawings. He was looking at her. They were so close she could see the flecks of gold in his brown eyes, could feel the warmth radiating from his body through his dress shirt. The air between them crackled with the same electric tension from their wedding night. But now it was charged with something new, an intellectual intimacy that had grown as they created something together. Maria, he said, his voice husky. Yes? Instead of answering, Ravi lifted his hand and lightly touched her face, his fingers tracing the line of her jaw with a reverence that made her heart pound. It was the first truly intimate touch since their wedding, and the impact was electric. You have ink on your face, he murmured. But he didn't pull his hand away. Do I? Maria knew it was a lie. She had been too careful to get smudged, but she didn't care. I've been wondering, Ravi said, his eyes fixed on her lips, if this marriage was a mistake. The comment should have stung, but Maria saw the truth behind the words. Why? Because you distract me in ways I cannot control. His confession was torn from him, a raw admission against his own will. Why do I wake up thinking about you? Why do I send flowers without remembering doing it? Why? He didn't finish the sentence, but he didn't have to. Maria could see the internal battle raging across his face. The man who had built an entire life on absolute control was discovering that his wife had become an unpredictable variable in all of his equations. Javi, she said softly, covering his hand with hers, this isn't a distraction. It's awareness. Awareness that maybe, just maybe, you're more human than you like to admit. For a moment, she thought he was going to kiss her. Their faces were inches apart, the tension between them almost palpable. Then his phone rang, a shrill sound that shattered the spell like breaking glass. Javi pulled back instantly, the mask of professional control sliding back into place with practiced precision. Malhotra. Maria watched his transformation with a mix of fascination and frustration. In a matter of seconds, he had become his ruthless self again, discussing numbers and deadlines as if the intimate moment had never happened. But she had felt his hands tremble. She had seen the raw vulnerability in his eyes. She had heard the involuntary honesty in his voice when he confessed she distracted him. It was progress, real cracks in the armor he had built around his heart. I have to go, she said when he finished the call. Maria, is everything all right? She smiled, picking up her purse. I know you have work to do, and I have a facade to present to the Toledo board tomorrow. He nodded, but she could see he wanted to say more. Instead, he just watched as she walked to the elevator, his expression unreadable. Maria, he called out as the doors began to close. Yes? Thank you for the project. And for coming? Always, she said, and she meant every letter of the word. That night, Maria found a gift on her bedside table, a first edition of Asterisk 100 Years of Solitude Asterisk in the original Spanish, with a simple note. Asterisk, a thought. Perhaps some kinds of solitude are optional. J. She held the book to her chest, smiling in the dark. Javi Malhotra was beginning to question his own convictions about emotional isolation. And tomorrow, she would take the next step in her carefully orchestrated campaign to show him that not all love was a weakness. Sometimes, it was the most powerful strength a person could possess. Through the wall, she could hear him pacing in his room, restless, sleepless. Good. Men who slept peacefully didn't question their life philosophies, and Javi Malhotra was definitely starting to question everything. The ringing started at 3:17 a.m. on a rainy Tuesday in July, yanking Maria from a dream where she and Javi were finally kissing without interruption. His phone was ringing insistently in the next room, followed by the muffled sound of his tense voice, speaking in Hindi, a language she was beginning to recognize as a sign that something was deeply wrong. After 20 minutes of tense silence, Maria couldn't wait any longer. She knocked softly on the half-open door and found Javi sitting on the edge of the bed, still wearing only his black silk pajama pants, his face buried in his hands. Javi? Her voice came out softer than she intended. He looked up, and Maria felt her heart contract. She had never seen that look on his face, a naked vulnerability that made his usual control seem like a distant fantasy. My father, he said, his voice raw. Heart attack. He's at Huber International Hospital. Maria didn't hesitate. I'll get dressed. We're going now. Maria, you don't have to. Don't be an idiot. She was already moving toward her closet. I'm your wife. This is what wives are for. In the car, an Aston Martin that Javi drove with mechanical precision through the empty Madrid streets. The silence was thick with unspoken things. Maria could feel the tension radiating off him like heat, his hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly his knuckles were white. When was the last time you two spoke? She asked gently. 2 years and 4 months. The precision of his answer revealed more than any explanation could. A fight? Javi laughed, but the sound held no humor. You could call it that. He told me I'd become a disappointment. That building skyscrapers wasn't a worthy career for a Malhotra, that I should have gone into medicine like my older brother. You have a brother? Had. The correction was sharp, final. Vikram died in a car accident 3 years ago. My father blames me for not being there, for choosing a project in Barcelona over a family gathering. The pieces began to click into place for Maria. Javi's reluctance to trust emotional connections, his obsessive need for control, the way he kept his distance from anything that could cause pain. He had lost his brother and gained the blame of a grieving father. Javi, she said, covering his free hand with hers, you know it wasn't your fault, right? His eyes met hers in the rearview mirror for a fleeting second before returning to the road. I know what logic says, but logic doesn't erase words spoken in anger and grief. Huber International Hospital, at 4 in the morning, was a world of stark white corridors and fluorescent lights that turned everyone into ghosts. Maria followed Javi through the medical maze, watching him reassemble layers of control with every step, the professional mask sliding back into place. But when they reached the intensive care unit and he saw the man in the bed, smaller, frailer, connected to machines that monitored every heartbeat, all of his composure evaporated. Arjun Malhotra, at 71, still carried echoes of the authority that had made Javi so determined to prove his worth. Even sedated and vulnerable, there was something imperial in his features, an arrogance that persisted beyond consciousness. Papa, Javi whispered, and Maria heard decades of unresolved pain in that single word. For the next 6 hours, she watched her husband confront demons he had kept carefully buried. He held his father's hand, spoke softly in Hindi, and would sometimes cry silently, wiping the tears away instantly, as if they were evidence of an unacceptable weakness. Maria didn't speak, didn't offer empty platitudes. Instead, she simply remained, a constant, silent presence, offering coffee when he needed it, a shoulder when the tears came, and space when he needed a moment alone. It was at 10:37 in the morning when Javi's father finally woke up, and the first sounds from his mouth were a critique of his son's disheveled appearance, that Maria saw something inside her husband break. You could have died, Javi said, his voice low but heavy with decades of accumulated frustration. You could have died, and the last words between us would have been accusations about my inadequacy. And would that have changed anything? Arjun Malhotra still had the ability to cut with words, even weakened. Would you still choose your buildings over your family? Enough. The word escaped Maria before she could stop it. Both men turned to her in surprise. With all due respect, Mr. Malhotra, your son has spent the entire night by your side, holding your hand, praying in 3 different languages for you to survive. If that isn't family, then I don't know what is. The silence that followed was taut. Arjun studied Maria with eyes she recognized, the same piercing intensity as his son's, but tempered by years of disillusionment. So you're the wife, he said finally. I am the wife, and I am also someone who recognizes love when she sees it, even when it's disguised as constant criticism and impossible expectations. Ravi touched her arm, a gentle warning, but Maria didn't back down. Your son built an empire from nothing. He employs thousands of people, creates beauty where there was decay, and he has done all of it while desperately trying to win the approval of a man who seems determined never to grant it. Maria, Ravi began. No, she said, turning to him. I will not stand here and watch you torture yourself for failing to be perfect in the eyes of someone who set impossible standards. And, she turned back to Arjun, I will not watch a man waste what might be his last chance to have a real relationship with his only son. Arjun's heart monitor ticked up slightly, but his eyes glinted with something that might have been respect. She's brave, he said to Ravi, though his eyes were on Maria. She is, Ravi agreed, and there was something new in his voice, a pride that made Maria's heart race. Over the next 3 days, Maria became the bridge between 2 stubborn men who loved each other but had forgotten how to show it. She translated Arjun's harsh critiques as poorly expressed concern, interpreted Ravi's defensive silence as a pain too deep for words. On the 3rd night, when Arjun was stable enough for real conversation, something extraordinary happened. Father and son began to talk, really talk, about Vikram, about loss, about the different ways people process grief. Maria was curled in an uncomfortable hospital chair, pretending to be asleep, but listening intently as Ravi told his father about the building he had designed in Vikram's memory. A children's hospital in New Delhi he had funded anonymously, his way of honoring a brother who had wanted to heal people. You never told me, Arjun said, his voice thick with emotion. You never asked what I was building, only why it wasn't medicine. The silence that followed was different, not tense, but reflective. Maria felt tears slide down her cheeks as she listened to decades of misunderstanding slowly begin to unravel. It was 4 in the morning when Ravi finally noticed she was crying. Maria, his voice was soft, concerned. Are you okay? She opened her eyes to find both men watching her with identical expressions of concern. Sorry, it's just, she wiped her cheeks. Seeing you two finally see each other, really see each other, it's beautiful. Arjun struggled to sit up straighter. I owe you an apology, my daughter. You don't owe me anything. Yes, I do. You fought for my son when I had forgotten how. That requires courage and love in equal measure. The word love hung in the air between them. Maria felt Ravi tense beside her, saw him prepare to deflect or deny, but then something in his expression shifted. She really does love me, he said quietly, as if the realization was dawning on him for the first time. Even when I don't deserve it, even when I try to push her away. And you? Arjun asked, his question direct, impossible to evade. Do you love her? Ravi looked at Maria, really looked at her rumpled clothes and tear-stained cheeks. at the way she had spent days being his anchor, without asking for anything in return. I, he started, then stopped and began again. I don't know if I know how to love anyone, but I know I can't imagine my life without her. I know she makes me want to be better than I thought I could be. I know that when she walks into a room, everything else just becomes background noise. Maria's heart stopped, then restarted at double speed. That sounds like love to me, my son, Arjun said softly. Maybe not the kind you see in movies, but real love. The kind that shows up, the kind that stays. Later, over terrible coffee and stale sandwiches in the hospital cafeteria, Ravi took her hand across the plastic table. Thank you, he said. For what? For fighting for me when I couldn't fight for myself. For seeing me when I was trying to be invisible. For, he paused, wrestling with the words, for teaching me that maybe love isn't a weakness. Maybe it's the strongest thing a person can do. Maria squeezed his fingers. Are you saying you're ready to learn? Ravi brought her hand to his lips, pressing a soft kiss to her knuckles. The first truly romantic gesture he had ever made toward her. I'm saying, he murmured against her skin, that I think I've been in love with my teacher for weeks, and I was just too afraid to admit it. The cafeteria around them faded away. All Maria could see were his eyes, dark, honest, and finally unguarded. I love you, Maria. I don't know how or when it happened, but somewhere between your determination to prove me wrong and your refusal to let me push you away, I fell completely and irrevocably in love with you. She reached out, stroking his face with her free hand. And I love you back, all of you, even the parts you think are too damaged to be loved. When he kissed her, truly kissed her, deep and desperate and full of months of repressed longing, Maria finally understood what all the poets had been trying to explain. Love wasn't something you fell into. It was something you chose every single day in 1,000 small ways. And Ravi Malhotra had finally chosen her. 6 months after the wedding that had shocked Madrid, Maria woke to the aroma of freshly brewed coffee and the soft sound of classical violin coming from the living room. It was Saturday, 7:30 in the morning, and Ravi should have been sleeping in. A small change in habit she'd noticed in recent weeks, ever since he had started choosing lazy mornings with her over emergency meetings. She wrapped herself in the champagne silk robe, the same one she'd worn on their honeymoon, now imbued with entirely different memories, and followed the music. She found Ravi in the kitchen, still in his pajamas, preparing what looked like a far too elaborate breakfast for a typical Saturday. Good morning, teacher, he said, without turning, but she could hear the smile in his voice. In the last few months, he had started calling her that, an intimate joke that acknowledged the role she had played in his emotional transformation. Good morning, my love. Maria's lips brushed the back of his neck. She inhaled his familiar scent, a warm blend of his cologne and the crisp aroma of toasting bread. What's all this? Can't I spoil my wife on a Saturday morning? You can, she said, circling around to face him. But you're obviously planning something. She saw it then, that specific glint in his eyes, the one that always appeared when he was hiding a surprise. Ravi Malhotra, what are you up to? He laughed, a rich, genuine sound that still made her heart skip a beat. You know me far too well. It's my job to know you well. Maria stole a strawberry from the tray he was preparing. So what is it? Pack something comfortable for a drive. We're taking a trip. What kind of trip? She studied him with narrowed eyes. Ravi, you know I have the final presentation for the Seville project on Monday. I've already spoken with the client. They've agreed to postpone until Tuesday. He turned to her completely, taking her hands in his. Maria, please, trust me. There was something different in his expression, a vulnerability mixed with a resolve she'd learned to recognize. It meant something important was happening. How long will we be gone? 24 hours. And you're not going to tell me where we're going? Ravi lifted their joined hands and kissed her knuckles, a familiar, tender gesture between them. I'll tell you this much. It's a place we've never been to together, but it's been a part of my life for a very long time. And today, I want it to become a part of yours. An hour later, they were in Ravi's Porsche, heading north out of Madrid. The landscape gradually shifted from golden plains to rolling, verdant hills. Maria could feel her husband's quiet anticipation in the restless tap of his fingers against the steering wheel. La Rioja, she said, as they passed the first road sign. We're going to wine country. Very clever. And what exactly do you have in La Rioja that I don't know about? Ravi hesitated, and Maria saw his hands tighten slightly on the wheel. The family estate. It's where my grandfather started everything, long before we moved to Madrid. It was the most important place of my childhood. The revelation stunned her. In 6 months of marriage, Ravi had shared so much about his present and his future, but he rarely spoke of his past. For him to take her to a place so deeply personal, it meant something. Will your father be there? She asked, thinking of the tense but real reconciliation that had happened at the hospital. No, he's in Mumbai visiting my aunt. Today is just for us. Hours later, they turned onto a gravel road that snaked through vineyards stretching as far as the eye could see. The Malhotra estate was a vision from another time. An 18th-century stone house, so carefully restored it was both rustic and impossibly elegant. Centuries-old vines clung to its walls, and the air was thick with the calming scent of lavender. Ravi, she whispered, stepping out of the car and turning in a slow circle to take it all in. It's absolutely magical. It was my grandfather's favorite place on earth. He used to say that here, among the vines, a man could discover who he truly was. Ravi retrieved a small suitcase from the trunk. Come, there's something I want to show you. He led her through the property to a small promontory overlooking the vineyards. A table had been set for two, with fine china and crystal glasses that captured the golden afternoon light. Ravi, Maria said, turning to him, her voice filled with wonder. What is all this? Instead of answering, he knelt. The movement was so sudden, so unexpected, it took her a few seconds to process what was happening. When she finally understood, she felt tears welling in her eyes. Maria Soledad Vega Malhotra, Ravi began, his voice trembling slightly. 6 months ago, at the altar, I told you I didn't believe in love. You told me you would teach me, and you did. You taught me that love isn't weakness, it's courage. It's not a loss of control, it's a deliberate choice. It's not something that happens asterisk to asterisk you. It's something you decide to do every single day. He pulled a small velvet box from his pocket, and Maria felt her heart stop. Our first wedding was a business arrangement. I want our second to be a celebration. He opened the box, revealing a vintage diamond ring, clearly a family heirloom. This belonged to my grandmother, the only thing my grandfather loved more than these vines. His voice grew thick with emotion. He once told me that true love is like a fine wine. It gets better with time, but only if you're willing to be patient with the process. Tears were now streaming freely down Maria's face. I wasn't patient with you at first, Ravi continued. I thought I could skip straight to the part where we were civilized partners, without going through the mess of actually knowing and loving each other. But you forced me to be patient. You forced me to feel. You forced me to admit that maybe I didn't know everything about how this works. He took the ring from the box, his hands shaking. Maria, you saved me from a life of emotional solitude I didn't even know I was living. You showed me that I could be vulnerable without being weak, that I could love without losing myself. You took a man who believed love was impossible and turned him into someone who can't imagine living without it. Maria covered her mouth with her hand, sobbing openly now. So I am here, in the most sacred place to my family, asking you not just to renew our vows, but to start our marriage over, the right way this time, with total honesty and with all of my love. He held the ring out to her. Marry me, Maria, again, forever, because I choose you every day for the rest of my life. Yes, she whispered, then louder. Yes, yes, yes. Robbie slid the ring onto her finger. It was a perfect fit. He stood and kissed her, a deep, passionate kiss as the sun began to set over the vineyards. There's more, he said against her lips. More? He gestured toward a stone path she hadn't noticed before. Tomorrow morning, at 10 o'clock, we're having our second wedding ceremony. Small, intimate, just us and the local priest. But this time, he smiled. That smile she had grown to love more than anything. This time, when he asks if I take you to be my wife, I'm going to tell him that I love you more than life itself. Maria laughed through her tears. And this time, when he asks if I take you to be my husband, I'm going to say I managed to do the impossible. I taught a stubborn man that love isn't a weakness, it's a superpower. They spent the night talking, dining at the table set among the vines as candlelight flickered and stars filled the sky. Ravi told her stories of his childhood here, of his grandfather who built this all from nothing, of how he had always dreamed of bringing the woman he loved to this very spot. Even when you didn't believe in love, Maria teased. Especially then, he said softly. I think a part of me always knew I was lying to myself. I was just too afraid to admit it. And now? Ravi took her hand, turning his grandmother's ring on her finger. Now I know. It was just a lack of context. I didn't know what I was missing until you showed me. The ceremony the next morning was everything their first had not been. Intimate, genuine, and filled with promises they both intended to keep. The small stone chapel was decorated with flowers from the garden, and their only guests were two local staff members who served as witnesses. When it was time for the vows, Ravi took Maria's hands and spoke from the heart. Maria, 6 months ago, I said I didn't believe in love. Today, I want to amend that statement. I believe in love. I believe in asterisk. Your asterisk, love, which transformed me from a man who was afraid to feel into someone who can't stop. I believe in asterisk, our asterisk, love, which started as a challenge and became the most powerful force in my life. And I believe in love, period, because you proved to me that it can work miracles. He took a deep breath. I promise to spend the rest of my life loving you with the same fierce imagination you used to teach asterisk, me asterisk, how to love. I promise to be vulnerable when it's needed, strong when you need strength, and always, always honest about how much you mean to me. I promise that no matter how many years pass, I will still wake up every morning and choose you. When it was Maria's turn, she smiled through her own tears. Ravi, when I said I would teach you about love, I had no idea you would be teaching me too. You taught me that true love isn't about changing someone, it's about complete acceptance. You taught me that the parts of us that are hardest to love are sometimes the parts that need it most. And you taught me that patience isn't just waiting for something, it's actively working for it every single day. She squeezed his hands, her voice growing stronger. I promise to never stop fighting for us, especially when things get hard. I promise to challenge you when you need it and support you when you need it. And I promise to always remember that our love isn't a project with an end date. It's a process we choose to repeat forever. When the priest declared them husband and wife, again, but for the first time with complete love, the kiss they shared sealed not just their vows, but a transformation that had begun in a cold Madrid church and found its completion here, among the vines of La Rioja. That afternoon, as they walked hand in hand through the sun-drenched vineyards, a thought made Maria smile. What is it? Ravi asked. I'm thinking about the title of our story, she said. What title? The love that had no name. Maria stopped and turned to him. For months, you felt something for me, but you couldn't call it love because you didn't believe it existed. It was a feeling without a name, powerful, transformative, but you couldn't define it. Ravi considered this, his thumb tracing circles on her palm. And now? He asked softly. Now it has a name. It has a definition. It has a purpose. Maria smiled. Now, it's simply love, the strongest kind there is, the kind that chooses to exist even when logic says it's impossible. When they returned to Madrid the next day, they were not the same two people who had left 48 hours earlier. Their apartment remained the same, but they inhabited it differently, not as polite strangers sharing a space, but as partners who had deliberately chosen to build a life together. 3 months later, when Maria discovered she was pregnant, Ravi didn't just weep with joy. He immediately began planning how to turn the guest room into the most beautiful nursery in Madrid. We will teach our son about love from his very first day, he said, his hands on her still flat stomach. Or daughter, Maria corrected gently. Or daughter, he agreed. We will teach our child that love isn't something that happens by chance. It's something you cultivate, like grandfather's vines, something that grows stronger the more you tend to it. And when Maria Isabella Malhotra was born 9 months later, her first moments in the world were surrounded by the very love her parents had built together. Intentional, profound, and unbreakable. Because some love stories begin with love at first sight. But the very best stories, They begin with two people deciding that love is worth learning, and then choosing to do the work every single day for the rest of their lives.